If you were transported to another world and acquired the ability to form contracts with any creature, what would you do with that power? Would you make a contract with cute animals just for fun? Or perhaps forge a pact with terrifying beasts to protect yourself? Maybe even form a contract with a group of girls to start a harem journey in another world? Unfortunately, there is a vast difference between imagination and reality. The other world is not that simple. The crowd mocked the protagonist for possessing the most useless ability of all. They say he signs contracts using gems, but he can only control a creature if it voluntarily eats the stone. Even the lowest level beasts clearly refuse to be controlled. Some even joke that he pulled the gem out of his rear, but that's another story. The protagonist doesn't understand why everyone acts as if nothing has happened. Is he the only one in the city who sees this? Isn't Pearl City an unprotected hunting ground? Everyone here is easy prey for the monsters. He hasn't even started his harem in another world, and everything is already falling apart. This can't be happening. If no creature wants this contract, he will walk a path no one has ever taken. He will form a pact with himself and become his own summoned beast. This time, all those who seek to harm the world, whether an alien beast or a horde of zombies, will not escape unpunished. In his past life, he was a lifeguard and died in an accident. After his death, he was transported to this fantastical world filled with alien beasts and awakened people. In this new life, he also awakened his powers. Using the contract gem, he would be able to subjugate the life, soul, and consciousness of any being that voluntarily consumed it. Supposedly, it was a powerful ability, but with an obvious limitation. The protagonist was holding a crystal in his hand when suddenly he was called and asked what he was doing. John Ping looked at the girl named Su Jingye with a smile and said nothing. Maybe she wanted some candy? He extended the crystal to her, and she frowned, telling him to stay away. After all, who would want to be under his control? Ping sprawled out on the steps and said it was just a joke. The creature must be fully informed and willing to make a contract. Otherwise, nothing happens even if it eats the gem. The original owner of this body almost died because of this ability. Fortunately, he switched sides and used the mental strength of his past life to help his body survive. Jingyo was irritated and displeased, told him not to give up so soon. The world is vast. Surely there must be a creature willing to be controlled. She grabbed the protagonist's head and he, annoyed, replied that it was easy for her to say, but who besides himself would be willing to do that? He opened his eyes and thought, why haven't he realized this before? Jingyo was surprised and exclaimed, asking what he was doing. Ping swallowed the crystal and immediately a green aura enveloped his entire body. They looked around and Jingyo asked if he was okay. He confirmed and she sighed in relief. She wouldn't let him scare her like that again. They started going down the stairs and she commented that it was already late and time to return to the dormitory. In the morning, she had to join the patrol, so he didn't need to wait for her. Ping asked if she really intended to graduate from high school. Jingyo looked up at the sky and said she had already mastered all the knowledge from the books. The only way to improve now was through battles, since always her dream had been to join the patrol to protect her home, and she finally had the chance to make it come true. She smiled excitedly, telling him not to get discouraged. Once he got stronger, they could even work together. Ping laughed and scratched his head. Everyone predicted he had a future back in the village and the farm. However, he didn't believe they would see each other again. He thought that even if she was just a childhood friend of the original owner of this body, it was still a little sad to say goodbye to her. He really wanted to hug her. The green spirit entered Ping's body and he hugged Jingyo gently but firmly. His spirit was surprised and thought, why was his body moving on its own? The protagonist pulled away and she, embarrassed, started to leave, saying it was time to go. Ping shouted for her to take care. She looked at him and told him to take care as well. After the farewell, he looked at his hand and thought that his body had hugged her on its own. Had he subconsciously given himself an order by accident? He needed to figure out to what extent he could control his own body. The protagonist was training, trying to understand if he truly had control over his movements. His green spirit ordered him to jump, but he ended up slamming his head into the ground. Then he activated his armor and tried to do a flip, but he wasn't a Parker master and landed face first. He couldn't keep going and was out of strength. Now he knew for sure that he could make his body perform almost any action, as long as it didn't exceed normal limits. Flying or transforming into something else was impossible. Additionally, there were certain actions he could perform instinctively, even without prior practice. So theoretically, as long as his physical abilities were high, he could learn any type of martial art. If he found a way to improve his physical condition, he could become even stronger. However, there was something he needed to test. The next day, he woke up in the cafeteria. He was surprised by this, but what confused him the most was the pain in his legs. After all, before going to sleep, he had ordered himself to go for a run in the morning. Had his body gone out running on its own while he was asleep? His idea from the previous day was right. The protagonist slammed his fists on the table and smiled. His body could obey orders even when his brain was unconscious. He looked around, hoping no one had noticed. Suddenly, people started shouting that Louises was there. Everyone greeted her and called her a goddess, and she waved at them all. Ping remembered this student. Did she always wake up this early? Suddenly, he looked around and asked what was going on. He was surprised and terrified, wondering what the hell that was. In place of the school goddess, there was a huge, terrifying monster full of sharp fangs. The creature lifted a student and devoured them. The protagonist was shocked. Why didn't anyone else see this? That wasn't the real Shiyu. She looked like a puppet tied to strings coming from the monster's claws. Her face was torn apart, and in its place was a black void, an insane smile, and rolled back eyes. She approached Ping and commented that he didn't look very well. In the real world, Xiu calmly approached the protagonist, who was sitting at the table. She asked if, by any chance, he was feeling sick. He didn't see a person, but rather a horrible monster behind her, almost piercing her shoulder with its claws. He thought he needed to calm down. Everything was fine. He sighed and smiled, saying that he had a nightmare last night and because of that, didn't sleep well. He slowly got up and started to walk away. Classes would be starting soon, so he needed to go. Xiu watched him with her terrible eye and smelled his fear. Maybe he was imagining things. Sometime later, Ping was walking around the school, hands in his pockets, deep in thought. What were the alien beasts doing there? Could no one else see them? Maybe he was hallucinating. He looked inside the classroom and realized he urgently needed to report this to the teacher. His eyes filled with terror because right in front of him, the monster was tearing a person apart. Immediately, he ran to the school rooftop where he sat on a bench and started screaming. Something was clearly wrong with this world. Was this hell on Earth? What the hell was that? A stone fell out of his pocket and he noticed it, picking it up. After eating the crystal, he began to see the alien beasts. Either way, he needed to return to normal, so he decided to eat the crystal once again. As soon as he did, everything shone with a green aura again, and Ping, surprised, asked what was happening. A system window appeared in front of him, informing him that identification was successful and playback was starting. He saw the moment when the monster attacked a person, and then the image disappeared. He sighed deeply. Did the identification ability awaken within him? A system grid appeared in his hand, confirming that everything was as it should be. The property panel displayed Ping's characteristics. He was both a beast and a master. His race was human, 3-star height, level 1. His physical strength and agility were 11 points, his force was 12 points, and his mental strength was infinite. The crystal was called the first gem, contract level, an item created by consuming physical and mental strength. If the target voluntarily leaves the gem, then life, soul, and consciousness will be under the summoner's control. Ping wondered, does the contract gem have levels? How could he know if the effect worked? Absolute command. A man has absolute power over his summoned beast. It can never disobey him. Absolute obedience. The beast listens and strictly executes all orders. Beginner identification technique. He can see his own data and identify targets. The success of the evaluation depends on the difference in strength between both parties. A new ability had emerged out of nowhere, so Ping wondered if it was related to the fact that he had eaten the gem again. He decided to analyze the situation. Now he was both the summoned beast and the summoner. He was controlled only by his own summoner, himself, so his body and spirit could not be disturbed by the outside world. Because of this, illusions did not work on him, which is why he could see the true forms of the beasts. All these alien beasts were celestial foxes, and at a very high level. He was still at level 1, so he was no match for them. Even if a celestial fox devoured someone right in front of everyone, people would only see 2 students having a normal conversation. The others simply wouldn't notice the difference. Since this ability was linked to the mind, he remembered Jingyo's powers, which were also spiritual in nature. Maybe she could find a solution. After school, Ping went home reflecting. He hadn't known these creatures existed outside of school. He looked at the people walking around him, but he didn't see them as humans. He saw them as monsters. How many of them were there? As he approached the patrol headquarters, he looked up at the building from below. He entered, and a receptionist greeted him, asking if she could help him in any way. Ping observed her with some discomfort and said he was looking for Jingyo, who was supposed to have arrived today. This girl was also a celestial fox. She asked him to wait a moment. Ping stepped aside and sat on the couch. He wondered if there was a celestial fox in the patrol. Not even the most experienced ones could notice the illusions. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice, and Jingyo appeared beside him. She called his name and asked what he was doing there. Surprised, he looked at her, scratched his head, and said he was worried about whether she would be able to adapt, so he came to check on her. She smiled and pointed at her companions. She was doing well and would now introduce them to him. They all took care of her. Ping looked at her with a sad expression and said, "Really? That's great." With determination, Jingyo raised her fist and said she would work hard to become stronger, avenge her parents' deaths, and fight against the monsters in the future. Excited, she asked if he wanted to join the patrol as they still needed more people. He awkwardly waved his hand and refused, saying he wouldn't be able to help them with anything. Farming was more suitable for him. As he turned to leave, Jingyo apologized. Ping realized that she had already adjusted well, so he decided to leave her be. He smiled at her, but when he turned around, his expression changed. All the people around her, including Jingyo, were celestial foxes. He left the patrol headquarters, disturbed, and mentally said goodbye to her. Once outside the building, he reflected on what he had just seen. What kind of joke was this? Wasn't the patrol considered the most powerful force in Pearl City? How did this happen? Jingyo had clearly just arrived today, and yet Ping stopped in the middle of the street and looked around. It seemed that celestial foxes weren't just infiltrating the school. In fact, they were spread throughout the entire city. All the people there were their herd. Ping discovered some information through identification. Most of the celestial foxes were of medium or high level. Beginners range from level 1 to 9, intermediates from 10 to 19, advanced from 20 to 29, and the highest levels from 30 to 39. But the patrol, which consists of many high-level awakened, is far too strong for them. The one who killed Exia is extremely powerful, and his intuition tells him that if he used an identification spell on him, the level would be blocked. Maybe it's a supreme level creature or even a royal one. Starting at level 40, royal foxes emerge. The other celestial foxes must have managed to defeat the alien beasts by reaching a high level. Unlike common alien beasts, celestial foxes possess extremely high intelligence, disguise themselves well, and coexist harmoniously with humans. But that is only at first glance. Their preferred targets are those with influence, social importance, or positions of power. The rest of the people are merely reserved food, engaging in a confrontation with the foxes asking to die. But he can't just watch while innocent people are killed. If only he could become stronger. A week later, Ping woke up at 4 in the morning. Lately, he had been waking up earlier and earlier. It seemed that the more he improved his physical abilities, the less time his body needed to rest. In the past few days, he had dedicated himself solely to physical training and had leveled up. In addition, he had been trying to create gems and consume them daily. He hoped to gain new abilities and talents, just as had happened the previous 2 times. But ever since he awakened identification, all the stones he created were colorless. Eating them had no effect. However, today the colors have returned. He tossed a crystal into the air and noticed that it was no longer transparent, but purple instead. Although it didn't look particularly appetizing, he hoped it would work this time. Upon ingesting the crystal, an unfamiliar sensation awakened within him, and his system panel appeared before his eyes. Level 2, growth potential, 4 stars. A new ability was acquired, Night Walker. He now had night vision, reduced presence in the dark, increased speed, lower weight, and total invisibility in the shadows. From now on, he could explore the city at night. The contract gem had also been upgraded, likely due to his new level. He looked down with a smile and wondered, does this mean that every time he levels up, he awakens a new talent? That would be incredible. It was time to start training. He got up and moved forward with determination. The effect of Night Walker activated. He was testing his new ability. Ping ran through the streets and realized that he could now see even better than during the day. Something caught his attention, a ring lying on the ground. He stopped, picked up the object, and asked himself, a ring? After several attempts, the system finally managed to identify it. Assassin's Ring. If worn, all living beings will subconsciously ignore your presence. However, high-level foxes are immune. Ping was surprised and activated playback. He was able to visualize the events leading up to the loss of the ring. He saw a celestial fox disguised as Shiyu. Standing before her was a masked man, the owner of the ring. He wielded a sword, ready to fight, but in his eyes, Shiyu must have appeared human. Was he her enemy? The man lunged at the fox, but she slashed him down with a single swipe of her claws. This didn't make sense. She was an orphan. She couldn't have enemies. There was only one explanation. Besides him, someone else was fighting against the monsters in this city. Ping reflected on this and looked at the ground, but suddenly, he heard a scream. Who's there? The monster was approaching. The protagonist had already hidden. The fox realized the ring was missing. That meant someone had been there. But there were no traces. How was that possible? If someone was hiding, then they must be an awakened of medium or higher level. The fox looked around, trying to find someone, and murmured that she should inform her highness. Ping peeked from behind the wall and thought, did they leave the ring there on purpose? If he put it back, it would be even more suspicious. He would have to keep it for now. At 6:30 in the morning, Ping returned home and concluded that since it was still dark, the Night Walker ability and the Assassin's Ring had completely hidden his existence. It seemed that strength didn't depend only on personal power, but also on equipment. The foxes were running somewhere nearby, and at that moment, Ping heard a voice calling his name. He looked around and asked who was speaking. The voice ordered him to hide. It was the spirit of Jin Yao who approached the protagonist. She hugged him and whispered, "They're already here." The time on the clock was 5:40 a.m. The protagonist was lying in bed, surrounded by several foxes. The fox Xiao smiled and asked, "Is it him?" He waved his hand, gathering energy in it, and commanded him to die. Just as the paw was about to reach Ping's face, the foxes were surprised. There wasn't even a hint of panic in his expression. If this boy had any information, he would have jumped to save his life. He doesn't smell the ring on him. A fox named Tian Chong asked his highness why not kill him. He runs every day, but not today. Something must be wrong. Xiao waved his hand and said that this wasn't the right person. He's just a useless piece of food. He looked at his team and ordered them not to waste their food. His pawns knelt before him and agreed. After they left, the protagonist woke up, surprised they had been so close that he was already scared. He looked at the ring he had just spit out and thought that he had forgotten himself. He runs every morning. Fortunately, he had ordered his body to fall asleep, so he hadn't noticed anything. He thought he had heard Jinyo's voice. Could it have been an illusion? Sitting on the bed and looking at the ring, he thought he was being sentimental. So what? He was only trying to become stronger to take revenge on her. Either way, to avoid raising suspicion among the celestial foxes, he needed to pretend he was living normally. When they arrived at school, all the students started whispering among themselves. A girl asked if she had heard the news. Today, a patrol found a decapitated body near their school. That body belonged to the infamous Black Death Star, the greatest assassin in the city. The last city lord was wounded by him. He died young after his old injuries flared up again. Ping thought, are they talking about the man in white? Even the greatest assassin was easily killed by these beasts. Her strength is truly unpredictable. They put the body on public display. Is this a warning for those who oppose the foxes? Ping was sure they would be searching for more, so he needed to find some kind of weapon to protect himself. He needed to stop by the workshop after class. Sometime later, he was walking down the street when he saw a Tianqing fox with a megaphone in hand. The system failed to identify this beast, and Ping thought that the blacksmith workshops were under the fox's control. Then, an identification succeeded. This was his 100th consecutive successful identification, so the skill improved to an intermediate level. After the upgrade, he would now be able to determine the growth potential of his opponents. Shenchang called out to him and told him to come in and take a look, and Ping observed his characteristics. This is a level 15 alienated fox. Growth potential 1 star. Talent, perceptual impairment. This fox is capable of altering the cognitive abilities of its target, preventing them from detecting anomalies. Ping moved on and refused Tianqing's offer, thinking that the first thing he needed to do was find a shop that wasn't under the fox's control. Ping walked past the Iron Soul Forge and overheard someone inside saying, "This sword is of the highest quality." He needed to take a look at that alloy and sharpening. A man swung the sword in his hand with a smug look and said that this sword would suit him, so if he still wanted to buy it, he would offer a discount. The old man blew smoke in his face and asked, did he say his daughter was calling for lunch? The man, with a very dissatisfied expression, placed the sword on the table and asked loudly, "Are you completely deaf?" His attention immediately shifted when Ping walked over and picked up the sword from the table. He examined the sword and activated the analysis skill, and the surprised man asked loudly, "Who are you?" He approached him and demanded, "Who gave you permission to touch my things?" A system window appeared in front of Ping's face, stating, "This is a magnificent one-handed sword of common level. It looks good, but it's already useless due to frequent breakages and repairs." Ping looked at him with surprise and said, "Wait, this sword is broken." The man easily snapped the sword's blade and agreed with him. Lightning began to surge from his body as he yelled, "You ruined everything, monster." His body began to change and he shouted, "Do you even know who I am?" His clothes tore apart due to his growing muscles and he declared, "I am a disciple of Master Mei from the Shinny Martial Arts Academy." He ran around Ping at incredible speed, who remained still in place. His speed was so great that his image lingered behind him for a moment before he attacked. Ping looked at him with a calm expression and struck his face with the palm of his hand. He observed, activated analysis, and asked, "Is this all you're capable of?" The man looked up from the ground and said that he fought unfairly. A status bar appeared, revealing, Purechi energy gives incredible visual effects to any skill, but excessive use creates a false sense of invincibility. Babo stood up and said that Ping should leave while he was giving him the chance. Ping turned to him, flexing his hand after the strike, and wondered if this guy was even real. Baobo, with a sly smile, was about to attack again. Ping looked to the side and Baobo thought, "This is my chance to land a surprise hit." The fight was resolved in an instant. He was on the ground again, Ping's fist was steaming after another strike, and he asked, "Who's the one fighting unfairly now?" A girl entered the forge and said, "I was gone for just 5 minutes and you already made a mess again." She clenched her fist with a threatening look and asked, "Do you understand now? Will you leave on your own or do I have to help you?" Baobo ran away at full speed, apologizing loudly to her. Ping stood beside her, thinking that he should look for another shop. He was about to leave when the girl suddenly placed her hand beside him and said, "Wait." She looked at him calmly and said, "We have something to discuss." Ping looked at her with suspicion and asked what she wanted to talk about. She confused him by stepping closer and saying, "I'm just a girl working hard to support myself." She also took care of her uncle, who had been devastated with grief since his daughter disappeared. He seems to have good muscles and decides his character isn't bad either. Ping, his face flushed with embarrassment, tries not to look at her and is about to ask a question. A girl with a cheerful expression hugs him tightly with one hand and says she is offering him the job of a blacksmith. He will also have to take care of the old man in the shop, of course. Food, housing, and salary will be covered by her. Ping remains embarrassed by what happened and thinks about it. Is she suggesting that he learn to work in a blacksmith shop? That could help him save on equipment, and besides, this shop is not under the control of the foxes. He shows his muscles with a very determined expression on his face and says that he is in one key to Ping, that you will become the king of blacksmiths. The girl with a cheerful expression slaps his shoulder so hard that he starts coughing up blood and loudly says that this is exactly what she expected from the one she chose. Ping has taken a huge amount of damage, is on the brink of life and death, and thinks that first he needs to try to survive. A few days later, the girl says he must try harder. Ping breathes heavily and asks Zhao Chang's sister if she is sure this is the right thing to do. She says he doesn't need to worry because no one will come here. So far, everything is going well. It seems like he's not that bad. This is their special technique called test forging. He must mix the materials as if he were kneading dough. She steps out and says he should wait here for a minute. She needs to go to the warehouse to get a uniform. The fuel is in the bucket. He must not let the fire go out, and she will be right back. Ping turns to 2 buckets, one containing coal and the other the scales of a scarlet snake. He realizes that the fire is about to go out soon and asks if this is all the fuel or not. Although that's not so important now, he will simply throw something in. He grabs something from the bucket and decides to toss toss it into the furnace to keep the fire burning. Suddenly, at that very moment, an extremely strong flame bursts from the furnace and hits him. He is surrounded by flames and soot and wonders if he is dead. A small monster head emerges from his chest, beginning to absorb everything around it. Ping feels intense pain from what is happening, screams in agony, and tries to stop whatever is happening to him. He abruptly opens his eyes. As the fire reflects in them, he doesn't understand what is happening. He breathes heavily and asks why all the fire has just disappeared. His heart starts beating rapidly and he feels excruciating pain. He begins to tremble from it, holds his chest, and uses the analysis skill. A system window appears before him and he wonders if his potential has increased again. If we recall the previous situation, and then a new level increases potential. But if he levels up his skill, the potential decreases. As long as he keeps acquiring new skills, his potential will continue to grow indefinitely. If he is not mistaken, then everyone should have a growth limit, but not him. Were all the escaped flames consumed by his fire devourer ability? He had already reached level 3, but he also managed to spend a new stone on it. Why did the effect only appear now? Are special conditions required for this? Chang returned to him and asked what happened here and why everything was covered in soot. She takes his hand and with a worried look, asked if he really threw the scales into the fire. It's exploding. It's all her fault because she didn't warn him about it. Ping is about to say something about the damage, but Chang interrupts him and asks what he is talking about. The most important thing is that no one was hurt, but how did he put it out so fast? A fire like that isn't easy to extinguish. He says it's a very long story. Chang was very surprised when she saw the alloy and said it looked good. To achieve that quality, extremely high temperatures are required. She picked it up in her hand, placed it in the mold, and said he was truly talented. It seems that there really are some idiots at the school considering his skills. He could easily get into any of the 3 organizations. Ping watches as she hammers and asks. They always call the guards and the investigation team one of the 3 organizations, but what is the name of the 3rd? Chang examines the dagger she just made and says that there really are 3 main organizations in Pearl City, but no one knows the details about the 3rd, its name, or what it does. She hands him a dagger and asks, by the way, hasn't he tried buying equipment? If he hasn't bought anything yet, what does he think about this? Ping looks at the system window, which says that this dagger is called Tier of Beauty of Excellent Quality. It works well against monsters from level 10 to 19. He asks, isn't this magnificent dagger too expensive? Chang says that according to the current exchange rate of materials, the price of this weapon is about $100,000. Ping is very surprised by this, looks at the dagger in his hand, and realizes that this is his salary for 3 years. He loudly asks, how can a guy with a $3,000 salary afford this? Chang laughs and says he can take it as a reward for his effort. She still has tasks to do, so she needs to go. But will he be okay if he doesn't go to school? Ping says she doesn't need to worry because he has already passed all his subjects. Chang says that in that case, he should take care of the old man, but under no circumstances should he allow him to work. Ping stands still, thinking. This forge hasn't been taken over since it's closed, but that explosion might attract a lot of attention. At night, he needs to go on a reconnaissance mission. Sometime later, a little girl is swinging on a swing among the ruins with a cheerful expression on her face. Her head has changed, and the system warns that she is a celestial mutant fox, a race of mutant foxes, level 3. Ping looks at her and thinks that this is the first time he has seen a fox with such a low level. He's at the same level as her, but his equipment is better, so he should at least try. Although the guards inside the city have fallen, it was unlikely that they had harmed the investigation team outside the city. If he brings back a corpse, that will draw their attention. Suddenly, his hand is covered in ice, and a terrifying voice behind him asks, is he seriously deciding to attack a child? If he makes a single move, she will kill him. He shouldn't even think about attacking. Ping stays still as someone holds his shoulder and thinks that this woman is much stronger than him. His ability and ring are completely powerless against her. The translucent girl crouches down and says that they should meet at the orphanage training ground if he wants to live. Ping abruptly turns around, but the girl and the ice that surrounded him have already disappeared. He stands still for a few seconds and thinks that it seems like she's not alive with those monsters, otherwise he would already be dead. He arrives at the right place and recalls that he grew up in that orphanage, practicing his stupid moves in a small park in front of it, which is why he called it the training ground. How did she find out about that? Maybe she can read minds. He's in the park and feels as if he has been watched the whole time. It seems like she led him there on purpose. Pate notices a monster approaching and wonders, is there a mutant beast in these woods? He activates the analysis ability and a system window appears before him, stating that it is a mutant called the poison shell rat, a type of rodent, level 5, potential 2. The poisonous tail has a venom sac, which is injected through bony growths. Ping looks at it with a serious expression and thinks that level 2 is very dangerous, so he will be cautious and, if necessary, dodge and try to escape. Maybe he should run away now. He draws his dagger and thinks that he must stop this mutant immediately. What would happen if the orphanage children wandered into the forest and encountered it? It's just a low-level mutant. With this weapon, he will be able to win. Ping quickly runs towards the mutant with the dagger in hand, his expression very serious. He thinks that in all those novels from his past life, characters immediately became martial arts masters after gaining powers, but that is complete nonsense. He is not a master, but he can command himself to fight. Suddenly, the mutant starts spinning very fast and flies toward him, something he did not expect. He He commands himself to defend, and his body blocks the monster's attack with the dagger. Ping holds off the monster's strong attack with the last of his strength and thinks that its armor is very tough and cannot break it, so he needs to wait for the right moment. He swings his dagger and the monster jumps back onto a high rock. It starts shooting venom from its tail, and Ping thinks that it's like playing a game, except the character is him. He commands his body and dodges all the venomous projectiles. He stops and realizes that only the monster's eyes are exposed, so he must strike at that moment. But when he falls, it can't be done. He needs to figure out how to expose this monster and make it come closer. A system window appears before him, stating that the basic ability, Fire Devourer, is the ability to absorb fire and accumulate it in the body, with the possibility of releasing it at any time before it depletes. The current status is 100 points out of 100. Ping assumes a combat stance and thinks that the first command is the Pearl Punch. He never imagined that the history lessons about it would be useful. The essence of this technique is to overpower the enemy with sheer brute force. He sprints toward the mutant at high speed, dodging all the venomous projectiles it fires. Ping spins the dagger in his hand and thinks that he will fake an attack first. He stabs the mutant with the dagger as it begins to spin rapidly and directs the accumulated flame into his other hand. He smiles, thinking it's time to add a little fire. He says that it shouldn't resent what is about to happen. Ping swings his flame-covered hand and sets the monster on fire, causing it to scream loudly. He concentrates the flame into his dagger and thinks that this is his chance to attack while it's exposed. He commands his body to strike the monster's weak points at close range, delivering a powerful blow using fire. Ping kills the monster with his attack, and the system notifies him that his level has been raised to the 4th, resistance to 16 points, strength to 17 points, and dexterity to 19 points. He realizes that real combat provides more experience than regular training. Thinking carefully, where did this rat come from anyway? It's as if someone had placed it there. No one decides that foxes could have gotten past the walls. Suddenly, he begins to be pulled downward by a strange energy and asks in surprise, "What is this?" He falls into an unknown dark space. The girl directs her hand toward him, controlling her energy, and says that she will give him 5 minutes. Ping is submerged by magical water and wonders if that woman has the same voice, right? She points her ocular sword at him and says that he must prove he is human. Ping, trapped by the magic, looks at her and wonders how he is supposed to prove that. After several thoughts of his own, he closes his eyes and asks if she can at least give him an idea of how he should prove that he is human. He wonders, is the rat in the forest part of the test? The girl calmly says that he has 4 minutes remaining. Ping starts trying to analyze actively but fails 20 times in a row. When there were only 2 minutes left, the system notified that the analysis had failed 999 times. The ability had developed to an advanced level. Now this ability allows determining a person's affiliation with an organization. The analysis was successful. A system window appears before him, stating that the name is Lai Shishin, human race, level 28. The organization is a cleaning team, the potential is 5 points, and the rank is a high level awakened. Water manipulation abilities allow her to control and accumulate water, providing precise control of the water around her body. Ping thinks that now it's no surprise that his silence did not help against her. He has never heard of a cleaning team. Could this be the third organization? Shishin remains standing in front of him and says he has 1 minute remaining. Ping tells her to wait a moment. She called that forest a training ground, right? That means that he, like her, grew up in the same orphanage, right? He thinks that, however, he doesn't remember anyone with that name. Either it's something else or she changed her name. He starts listing all names similar to hers, and she is surprised when she hears the name Lai Sizzy. She makes a quick movement with her sword and leaves a subtle cut on him. She approaches him and loudly says that this does not prove he is human. Ping looks at her in surprise and thinks about it. Judging by her reaction, could it really be her? She was 3 years older than him and also managed to graduate high school and join the organization. If there's anything, that's all they know. He dives into his childhood memories associated with her. Back then, when they were at the shelter, she would swing her fist and say that this technique was called Amazing Sizzy. That technique was invincible, and you should repeat it. In the present, Ping makes her feel embarrassed because he starts imitating her movements, laughing and quoting what she used to say, that this was the first, second, and third form of Sizzy's invincible fist. That is her, right? She sheathes her sword with a red face and says she has a second question. According to the Academy's records, he has the Contract Stone ability, considered useless due to its inability to activate. So he must answer. How did he do all of this? Ping recalls the past and says that 2 weeks ago, he ate his own stone, thus becoming his own summoner. Because of that, the illusion of monsters no longer works on him, and based on his data, there is a large number of celestial foxes in this city. It seems that an entire clan has infiltrated this city. Their powers are a cognitive distortion. Sissy grabs his clothes and asks loudly if he is serious about this. Ping remembers all the monsters and says that the owner of the Wanshan Cafe and a furniture store on Lei Street, as well as 3 blacksmiths on Lasnitsa Street. And that little girl she stopped him from killing is also a fox. Everyone he named is a low-level fox. She can verify it for herself. Sissy lets go of him and says that he must stay there, and she will return soon. She takes a magic crystal and asks Jimbo if he thinks this information can be trusted. The man, standing beside the other two, says that the first thing they can confirm is that they have never encountered fox-type beasts in this city, but they do have information that foxes possess this ability. He has sent a team to detain 2 people from those stores. His attention is drawn to a very loud explosion that occurs beside him. They notice 2 people wearing the same clothes and ask what happened there. 2 young men run toward them while being chased, and one of them loudly tells the commander that this is a saleswoman from the store. She went crazy and attacked them when they started leaving the city. The saleswoman leaps and flies toward Jimbo, who remains calmly in place and watches her. He swings his fist, directing his energy into it, and says that this is a stupid idea. He delivers a very powerful punch, producing a deafening sound, greatly surprising the monster. She falls to the ground, dark energy emanating from her, and he says that she should have thought better before doing something like this. The magic stopped working when that fox died, and Jimbo says that this means the informant was not lying, and now they know what they are dealing with. He waves his hand and loudly orders them to alert the other team and then deal with the targets. His subordinates bow and agree loudly. At the same time, at Pearl Academy, Shiu is lying on the balcony while a girl is beside her. She feels something strange, sits up, and is startled by it. The girl calls her highness, perplexed. Shiu abruptly jumps off the balcony, lands on the roof of a nearby building, and says that Yiju is dead. Someone killed her outside the city. And another person was recently killed on Lei Street. They were killed instantly. They didn't even have time to escape from sight. The spirit of a terrifying monster appears beside her, and she loudly asks, what kind of people are these? Sometime later, Ping asks if she has already verified it. Sizzy nods and says that, however, there is a nuance. His sudden ability to see through the illusion, but what if it were a trap set by them? For now, he will be their eyes and ears. She would protect him from the shadows until everything was resolved. If he discovered anything, he would have to tell her at night. Ping stretches his shoulder and asks if he will be protected and monitored. He agrees, and until the issue with the foxes is resolved, he's in the business. Stacey throws something to him and says it's a cold jade pendant paired with a warm one. If anything happens, he should put it in the fire, and then her pendant will warm up, allowing her to come to his aid as quickly as possible. Even with her protection, it's better for him to continue studying. He can only trust his safety to himself. Ping looks to the side, confused, and says he's been thinking about starting to study martial arts, but the prices of the tuition fees are holding him back. Stizzy waves her hand and says she will ask the organization for a scholarship, but in the meantime, he should look for a school for himself. He asks with a happy face if she can really do that. He's very grateful to her for this. Sometime later, Ping walks down the street and thinks that there have been fewer foxes around lately. It seems they've started working actively. She didn't introduce herself. Apparently, they still don't trust him much. If it weren't for the dramatic development of the analysis, he would probably be dead by now, but he never imagined she would be part of the cleaning team. How did they know something happened in the city? It doesn't matter. As long as they can kill all the monsters, he'll help them. It was very generous of them to give him 10,000 coins. His attention is drawn to a girl named Wang Jimin, who approaches a passerby with leaflets and says that anyone interested in the Beast King Fist can study martial arts. Ping walks up to her and asks if he can take a look. He grabs the leaflet, sees that the training, from the basics to the secret techniques, costs from 500 to 10,000 coins and says it's very expensive, plus there's no guarantee it will work for him. Jimin, excited, says she guarantees it's worth the price. Their Beast Fist technique is famous throughout Pearl City. She hands out all the leaflets and says that if he doesn't believe her, he can show her. She enters a combat stance and says that the initial forms are the Monkey King Fist, the Crocodile Monster, and the Phoenix Claw. Ping watches and commands his body to learn. He thinks these techniques seem very good. The stance and movements are much better than those of the Pearl Fist. It's quite an interesting fighting style. Jimin swings her foot in the air and says that this style has several variations, but there's no single form. Ping watches how she fell after the strike and thinks that obviously she doesn't know it well enough, but he sees that it's simply marvelous. 2 young men approach them, and one of them asks loudly who allowed them, the clowns from the Beast Fist School, to distribute leaflets there. Jimin stands up, apologizes, and says he didn't know it wasn't allowed to distribute there. Baobo walks up to them and asks if the Beast King Fist is the same crazy technique. He suggests they visit the Xingyi Martial Arts School. Ping points at him and asks if that's the school where they teach the 5-fold lightning strike from the knees. Baobo gets very angry and says loudly that this idiot is talking about the 5-fold lightning strike attack, which will make him fall to his knees. That's right, he was at the forge that day. Xiang Haiyang and Day should capture him. Jimin steps in front of Ping and says she won't let them insult him. Ping looks at these two and uses his analysis skill. Cistern windows appear before him, indicating that he is human. His name is Chang Hin. He is part of the Xingyi Martial Arts School faction, has a potential of 1 point, and it is at level 4. The ability is Body Enhancement, which trades 70% of intelligence for 30% of Awakener power. Chang makes the name, and everything else is exactly the same as his brothers. Ping looks at them with a very surprised expression on his face and asks if they trade intelligence for strength. Are they sure this is a skill? He looks at Jimin and thinks she has incredible incredible potential. The system window says that she is human, part of the Beast King Fist faction, with a potential of 7 points. Low-level skills, diligence, which reduces learning time by 90%, but accelerates the rate of development in practice by 10 to 10,000%. Ping thinks she's very talented, she still has everything ahead of her. But now she can handle her power. Ping stretches his shoulder and asks if he will be protected and monitored. He agrees, and until the issue with the foxes is resolved, he's in the business. Stacy throws something to him and says it's a cold jade pendant paired with a warm one. If anything happens, he should put it in the fire, and then her pendant will warm up, allowing her to come to his aid as quickly as possible. Even with her protection, it's better for him to continue studying. He can only trust his safety to himself. Ping looks to the side, confused, and says he's been thinking about starting to study martial arts, but the prices of the tuition fees are holding him back. Stizzy waves her hand and says she will ask the organization for a scholarship, but in the meantime, he should look for a school for himself. He asks with a happy face if she can really do that. He's very grateful to her for this. Sometime later, Ping walks down the street and thinks that there have been fewer foxes around lately. It seems they've started working actively. She didn't introduce herself. Apparently, they still don't trust him much. If it weren't for the dramatic development of the analysis, he would probably be dead by now, but he never imagined she would be part of the cleaning team. How did they know something happened in the city? It doesn't matter. As long as they can kill all the monsters, he'll help them. It was very generous of them to give him 10,000 coins. His attention is drawn to a girl named Wang Jimin, who approaches a passerby with leaflets and says that anyone interested in the Beast King Fist can study martial arts. Ping walks up to her and asks if he can take a look. He grabs the leaflet, sees that the training, from the basics to the secret techniques, costs from 500 to 10,000 coins and says it's very expensive, plus there's no guarantee it will work for him. Jimin, excited, says she guarantees it's worth the price. Their Beast Fist technique is famous throughout Pearl City. She hands out all the leaflets and says that if he doesn't believe her, he can show her. She enters a combat stance and says that the initial forms are the Monkey King Fist, the Crocodile Monster, and the Phoenix Claw. Ping watches and commands his body to learn. He thinks these techniques seem very good. The stance and movements are much better than those of the Pearl Fist. It's quite an interesting fighting style. Jimin swings her foot in the air and says that this style has several variations, but there's no single form. Ping watches how she fell after the strike and thinks that obviously she doesn't know it well enough, but he sees that it's simply marvelous. Two young men approach them, and one of them asks loudly who allowed them, the clowns from the Beast Fist school, to distribute leaflets there. Jimin stands up, apologizes, and says he didn't know it wasn't allowed to distribute there. Baobo walks up to them and asks if the Beast King Fist is the same crazy technique. He suggests they visit the Xingyi martial arts school. Ping points at him and asks if that's the school where they teach the 5-fold lightning strike from the knees. Baobo gets very angry and says loudly that this idiot is talking about the 5-fold lightning strike attack, which will make him fall to his knees. That's right, he was at the forge that day. Xiang Haiyang and Day should capture him. Jimin steps in front of Ping and says she won't let them insult him. Ping looks at these two and uses his analysis skill. System windows appear before him, indicating that he is human. His name is Chang Hin. He is part of the Xingyi martial arts school faction, has a potential of 1 point, and it is at level 4. The ability is body enhancement, which trades 70% of intelligence for 30% of awakener power. Chang makes the name, and everything else is exactly the same as his brothers. Ping looks at them with a very surprised expression on his face and asks if they trade intelligence for strength. Are they sure this is a skill? He looks at Jimin and thinks she has incredible potential. The system window says that she is human, part of the Beast King Fist faction, with a potential of 7 points. Low-level skills, diligence, which reduces learning time by 90%, but accelerates the rate of development in practice by 10 to 10,000%. Ping thinks she's very talented, she still has everything ahead of her. But now she can handle her power. She crouched down, ready to attack, and thought, it looks like they are attracted to something. She advanced. What would you do with that power? In that case, I'll take the risk. As the injured rabbits flew in all directions, she swung the sword again, advancing and shouting last. She thought, if I'm right, the answer is inside their leader. She placed her hand on the ice and said, release. The ice in that area shattered, and she spread the fragments to the sides, saying she had found it. Holding the orb between her fingers, she shouted, indeed, there is a soul attraction pill here. Ping looked at her, surprised, and asked, soul attraction pill. What is that? It smells good. Shishin explained that it was a device created by an organization to control alienated beasts, the serpent family with the Zhu family. So it appeared after everything. She said the soul attraction pill emits a unique scent that only beginner and intermediate level beasts can sense. That smell attracts the beasts to eat the pill. Unlike gems, animals that consume the soul attraction pill lose their minds and end up being domesticated. But no one knows how the Zhu family controls the domesticated beasts. These things aren't digested. If not controlled, they will multiply. She squeezed the orb in her hands and poured the dust formed from it, saying, anyway, the rebellion of the alienated beasts must be related to the soul attraction pill, and I will report everything to the headquarters. As for whether this is the work of the Zhu family until the investigation is completed, you must be honest with me and train outside the city." Ping saluted her and shouted, "Yes." She said she was in a good mood. A creature hidden under a black cloak observed from behind a large tree nearby. Ping looked at Shishin with a surprised expression as she sliced the tree in half with a sharp motion. The protagonist asked, alarmed, what happened suddenly. She looked at the fallen tree and said, "Nothing." She wondered if it was just a mistake on her part. A week later, the fox addressed Shiyu as Your Majesty and said that the foxes living near Tinker Street usually gathered there. She thought about it. A strong wind was blowing from the outside and strange sounds could be heard. Shiyu thought, the rebellion of the alienated beasts is happening more and more. Could this be the work of Huang Ziming? They thought they couldn't rely entirely on that person. She would also start to take action. The girl stood up from the chair and began to exude magical energy from her body. She said she was sure they already knew. Not long ago, people had found a way to overcome psychic manipulation, which caused great losses among her people. In the past week, she discovered that more than half of her men had died on Tinker Street. They lived near a specific street and would probably be the next targets. She wanted her men to cause a big disturbance together so that the enemy would think they had discovered something. This way, they would think her people were trying to escape and would act first. Alif thought and understood what she meant. Shiyu angrily shouted, "I want to see who these people are." The foxes agreed with her. After some time in the forest, the rabbits were wandering through the clearing eating grass. The protagonist suddenly jumped onto a rabbit with an attack. He plunged his dagger into the beast and burned its body to disarm it. A system alert window appeared before him. The Nightwalker was halted. The other rabbits scattered in panic. Ping thought that after a week of destroying rabbits, his level had risen to 6. Furious rabbits jumped around him and he remained in a combat stance waiting for the attack. He thought that now he had also mastered their attack systems and weaknesses. The evil rabbits released green masses from their mouths toward the protagonist. He jumped with a fire attack, thinking that he could neutralize the following attacks without taking damage. When provoked, they covered their entire bodies with acid to engage in close combat. The acid could be set on fire, but the problem was that it burned very little and the rabbits wouldn't die that way. Ping set one of the rabbits on fire and stabbed it with a dagger. He had red snake scales in his hands and threw them at the burning rabbit. The protagonist thought that if he used the red snake scales as fuel, the fire would burn forever. The furious rabbits continued to leap around him and his burning companion. Ping thought he would call this Fire Eater. 3 flavors of true flame. Maybe 2 would already be enough. Suddenly, a group of rabbits appeared in a large funnel of fire, all burning. The protagonist exited the funnel and thought that he had collected the snake scales for a long time and now had used them all. After dealing with so many rabbits, his stats must have improved. The furious rabbits were burning until they turned to ashes. He made a few identifications. Ping smiled and said he had leveled up just as he expected. A system notification window appeared before him. His level had risen to 7 and all values had increased by 1 point. Since he killed more than one enemy, his value increased by an additional point. Current personal attributes: physical strength equals 24, mental power equals infinite, strength equals 25, dexterity equals 29. The average value for a person is 10. The contract gem level increased by 1, now at level 5. The effect of level 5 was activated. He thought that the contract gem had also been improved. He thought the gem's level was synced with his own level. This time the gem was blue, but after upgrading to level 6, it was still at level 4. This was because the contract gem was harder to upgrade. Next to him was the corpse of a rabbit, exhaling dark energy. The protagonist wondered if he should consume the enhanced gem and wondered what kind of ability would be awakened this time. He thought it would be a combat talent and hoped it would be that. Suddenly, the rabbit's eyes opened and it emitted an evil sound. The rabbit began to rise, but the protagonist didn't understand what was happening. He turned and shouted, "Is this rabbit alive?" The evil rabbit exhaled dark purple energy from its body and stared at him. Ping activated the Fire Eater skill, Fire Entanglement. Flames shot from his hands and he took a confident stance, saying that no matter how many times he did this, he was no longer the same person. The evil rabbit didn't leap to attack him and the protagonist prepared to take the blow. The rabbit approached him, ready to strike. Ping spun his dagger in his hand and asked, "Did the rabbit come straight for me?" He swung the dagger forcefully at the rabbit, but missed. The evil rabbit seemed to have no body, and the strike came from nowhere. The protagonist smoothly switched the dagger to the other hand and looked at his opponent thinking, "What the hell? Did I kill so many rabbits that I created a ghost?" Confidently, he gripped the dagger and said that whether it was a spirit or a ghost, he would let it die. Ping struck the rabbit. The rabbit, exhaling dark energy, was lying unconscious and the energy had dissipated. He looked at the rabbit and asked, "When did this rabbit acquire this skill? Was it also controlled by the soul attraction pill?" The protagonist cut the rabbit's body open and retrieved something purple. He said, "Indeed, there is something here, but it doesn't seem to be the right pill." He made an identification. A system window appeared before him. Cannot be identified. He thought it had been a long time since he found something so hard to identify. Another system window appeared. Identification successful. Dark Mist Essence. Unknown quality. Essence of power stored in the ovaries of the black goat. Consumption may lead to unexpected consequences. Ping thought it was a goat treasure. A system window appeared before him. It couldn't be identified. The protagonist lit a fire beside him and observed the object. A new system window appeared, indicating identification failure. Identification successful. Dark Mist Essence. Unknown quality. Essence of power stored in the ovaries of the black goat. Consumption may lead to unexpected consequences. At this point, the protagonist began to perform several analyses until one succeeded. So after that, a majestic goat that exhaled dark purple energy appeared before him. Many different animals were in front of the goat. The goat ran toward the crowd, and the crowd ran toward it. The animal was moving westward. The raven landed. The pig was coming. Distribution. The goat spread its dark energy and moved as if it had no body. The goat entered the pig's back and attacked it by surprise. It bit the side of the pig. The pig screamed in pain and fear. Dark energy infiltrated the pig. This energy was spreading throughout his body. The protagonist asked, "Has everything gone to hell?" He had a feeling that this item was like a wind gem, a rare item. What would the effect of the pink gem be? He observed the object and thought that touching it directly wouldn't yield any results, unlike the last time. Would he have to swallow the item? Ping said the problem was that it belonged to a black goat. It was actually a diaphragm. He remembered Sue and said goodbye to her. The protagonist said he was as weak as a nightmare, so who was he to make a choice? He decided not to be afraid and swallowed the item with great energy. Ping's eyes opened in pain. He held his head and began to scream. He bent down to the ground and writhed in pain. Ping remembered hugging her. Sue, who was a puppet in the fox's hands, appeared before him. Suddenly, her voice trembled, and she called his name, asking him to promise that no matter what happened to him, he should live. The girl was crying blood and smiling. The protagonist showed his teeth and told her not to worry until he killed all those foxes. He was not going to die. A system alert window appeared. Identification successful. The property panel. Rank, Beginner Awakened. Level 7. Growth potential, 6 stars. Physical strength equals 26. Mental power equals infinite. Strength equals 25. Dexterity equals 29. Talents. Contract Gem level 5 activates bonus effects of level 5. Another system window appeared. Stygian Mist Body Beginner. Absorbs the fear of a creature and transforms it into manipulable mist. Mist supply is 20 out of 100. For each point of accumulation of this mist, a solid Stygian mist will be generated with 10% attack power and 10% defense. Up to 1000%. Ping crouched, sweating, and said that this time the talent was of the combat type, both for attack and defense. The strength seems to depend on the amount of mist consumed. The growth increased by 3 stars. The Stygian Mist Body is very strong. The protagonist laughed and cried. He said that it was a curse. Why did it feel like this? Was it shame, happiness, anxiety, sadness? Who knows? 5 men began to approach him from behind. Ping said that in any case, he would soon have the strength to avenge Sue. The man in front decided to ask if he was okay. Another man said it was better to leave to let them handle their own problems. Another confirmed his words and said they should go to the city as long as there were no animals around. The protagonist began to exhale dark energy and rise from the ground. The man in front looked at him in fear and didn't understand what was happening. He stood up from the ground and turned threateningly. The people threw everything they were holding and ran, screaming that it was a ghost, a ghost. The protagonist didn't want to scare them and said everything was fine. The system window appeared. Mist supply is 23 out of 100. Mist supply is 30 out of 100. Mist supply is 35 out of 100. He created blue energy in his hand and asked, "Does this mean I can absorb someone's fear and transform it into mist?" This mist doesn't seem normal. It's not even energy. Still, the mist can change shape depending on his thoughts. Ping imagined a monster's hand in place of his own, and the hand transformed. Then he introduced the weapon and asked, "I wonder how strong it is?" The protagonist held his hand, in which the dark weapon was created, passed through the tree, and said he would first try to cause minimal damage. The tree was smoothly cut exactly as he moved, and it began to fall. The boy was surprised and exclaimed, "It's so powerful that by using just 1 point of Stygian Mist Reserve, this happens." He used this skill a few more times on the falling tree, his hand moving quickly and confidently. Now the square wooden pieces started to fall from the sky. Ping said it was quite interesting. He looked up and used 10 points of Mist Reserve to act as a shield against the falling tree. The protagonist said he could both cut and protect against attacks. This mist would fit very well. When used properly, this skill would become his best card against high-level alienated beasts. He thought that all he needed to do was keep evolving and become stronger with the sweet team. Suddenly, Stizzy ran after him, shouting his name. Stizzy ran around him and prepared to fight. She shouted, "Did you find the mist beast? Where is it?" The protagonist became emotional and thought that scene was so familiar, and he immediately thought of his sister, Cham. He said that's what happened. After a while, Stizzy became very surprised and shouted, "What? You ate the essence of dark mist." She approached him and yelled in a threatening tone, "Do you want to die? How dare you eat something of unknown origin? Do you realize you almost died?" Ping smiled, scratched his head awkwardly, and thought he had checked it it with his identification. The girl turned around and crossed her arms in front of her. He said that it was fine. If he got into trouble, he could order himself to spit it out. Cease clicked her tongue and asked why he didn't think he could get rid of it. Did he not think it could be a parasite? The protagonist pressed his chest and said that she meant what he ate was dangerous. The girl said with her eyes half closed that the distant mist beasts were creatures of unknown origin. They don't have a permanent form and usually live in certain organisms. The black goat and the bullet rabbit he mentioned could be puppets of the distant mist beast. After the death of the host body, such animals enter one of their organs and wait for the next host. The fact is, the Stygian mist can manipulate what it infects. Pain became very scared and thought, doesn't this mean the mist infected him too? The intense pain he felt when eating the essence was because the mist was taking control of his body. He thought about this and asked if he was fine, meaning the parasite had failed. Cease answered that she didn't know. He is special. Perhaps the monster that destroyed the distant mist beast lives inside him. Or maybe the parasite doesn't affect him because he has total control over himself. She smiled maliciously at him and shouted. In any case, if something happens to him, she would have to stab him. Sesu began walking toward him with shards of ice above her hand. Ping became frightened and said he must have made a mistake. A spider descended between them. The spider looked into the girl's eyes. She became very scared and screamed, "Spider!" Sisu created a weapon in her hand and started swinging it around in panic. She screamed, "A spider this big!" The spider became scared of her and tried to escape. The protagonist was surprised that a girl like her was still afraid of spiders. The girl clung to him and shouted for him to get her out of there faster. Faster! Ping smiled, gently held her head, and wondered if she was still afraid of insects. Just like when they were children. Memories of the orphanage resurfaced. Ping was running toward her, shouting for her to see what he had caught. Stacy was sitting under a tree reading a book. She asked, "What is it? Show me." He poked her face with the joy beetle. The girl tried to push him away and squealed in fear, asking him to take the insect away. The beetle managed to escape from the boy's hand and flew away. He was upset and said that it was his new friend and she just scared it away. Sesu gave him a slap on the head and said he was a stupid child. There were so many kids at the shelter who could be his friends. Why do you want to capture insects to be friends with one? Ping said the children would leave the shelter one day. What should he do then? The girl hugged him and promised that no matter what happened, she would always be his friend. The boy asked if it was true, that she wasn't lying. She replied that they should promise each other. And now, after all these years, he was holding her again. Sisu became embarrassed, pushed him away, freezing him, and shouted, "Why are you holding me so tightly?" Ping broke free from the ice inside. The girl turned around and said thoughtfully that in nature, any object of unknown origin is dangerous. Free cheese only exists in a mouse trap. Although he seemed to have avoided the consequences this time, he shouldn't lower his guard when facing similar things in the future. She smiled while smoothing her hair and said it was something he should remember. Ping agreed with her. He thought he had always felt that Sisu had become cold and distant after joining the team, but now he saw that she hadn't changed at all and still cared about him. She just didn't want to show it. The amulet on her arm beeped and lit up. Sisu grabbed it in her hand and shouted, "What's happening?" She then realized and told Ping that his investigation and training had ended and they needed to return to Pearl City. The protagonist asked what had happened. She moved toward the city and said that the group leader, Bo, had been severely injured by a fox, so she needed to return to the city immediately to provide support. Ping followed her and said that even he had kept her waiting. Why not call an investigation team from another city to help? She said that would attract too much attention, and the world outside the city was a complicated place, so she would explain it to him on the way. On the way, Sisu told him something about the world outside the city. He didn't know when it started, but the alienated beasts ran wild, and the surviving humans were forced to build a wall for protection. Due to block traffic, they could only rely on the investigation team and civil society activists to develop maps. According to the investigation team, there are wild villages and settlements near Pearl City, located in areas with fewer alienated beasts. There is a farther sea, but due to the high-level alien beasts living there, they did not continue exploring. She doesn't know if there are other cities. What lies beyond the sea? After a while, when they reached the city, Sisu asked the man what the current situation in the city was. He replied that they were relying on an illuminated canopy to monitor the situation in Pearl City. Until last night, they had not detected any abnormalities with the celestial foxes. The intermediate and beginner level foxes from Tinker Street came to the surface. They engaged in battle with them. They didn't know it was a trap. The enemy leader was there. The team leader, Bo, was severely injured while covering their retreat. Now the captain wants them to take over their roles and lead the team that protects Pearl City. Ping followed them through the city and ate. Sesu said she understood him. The protagonist asked if they needed his help. She said they didn't need help yet, and that you should return to Iron Spirit. She would look for him later. The boy obeyed and silently watched them leave. He thought it would be great if Bo and Sisu were safe. Ping stretched and said that anyway he could finally relax. The last few days in the desert had been exhausting for him. He was walking through the streets of the city, and behind him, a man was at the counter and said that he wanted that. The protagonist said with his hands in his pockets that he was wondering how Jaemin was doing with the hunter's fist. Suddenly, something occurred to him. He thought, why are people not moving? Ping turned to the food stall and saw that people were indeed frozen. The protagonist was approached by a man. He was startled. The man looked at him and shouted, "Who are you?" Ping used the identification. System windows started appearing in front of him. He could not be identified. Failed the identification 6 more times. Failed the identification 66 more times. Because of this, he couldn't see any of his characteristics. The man in the jacket said that he wouldn't see his abilities if he tried to research them. But still, he needed to compliment him. Even intermediate level awakenings can only use the identification technique a maximum of 10 times per day, but he could use it indefinitely. Ping thought he had ordered his body to perform the identification, so naturally, he could use it indefinitely. But how did he know that? He asked what the man wanted from him. The protagonist thought that the man seemed peaceful, but exuded an aura that sent chills down his spine. The man in the jacket asked if Ping was playing with him. Ping assumed a combat stance and prepared his dagger. He thought that perhaps the man was just testing him. The man asked what was wrong. Wasn't he going to fight? Or was the revenge for Sue just empty words? The protagonist lunged to attack him and thought that instead of fleeing, he would do what the man wanted. His dagger was burning with flames and he drove it into the man's head, but instead, a glass shattered in front of him. Ping wondered if that was a time fracture. He held the dagger in one hand and prepared fire in the other. The protagonist thought it was probably a spatial ability. He appeared behind him. Ping launched a fire fist at the man. The man in the jacket caught the fist in his own hand and said that Ping needed to improve his speed. Ping asked seriously. His opponent didn't understand. He prepared a flame hand behind his back. The protagonist suddenly grabbed his opponent's arm and activated the Flame Devourer ability, Fire Binding. The fire surrounded the man in the jacket on all sides, but suddenly, Ping realized something was wrong. The man became translucent and said that he had attacked for too long. Now it was his turn. There was a silhouette behind him. The protagonist thought it was a doppelganger. The man shot a water arrow at the opponent and the translucent silhouette in front of him gave way to the attack. Ping barely managed to dodge and asked, "Is this a water element this time?" Arrows started being launched at him non-stop. The protagonist tried to dodge and thought, what the hell? How many abilities does he have? He's a monster. A system window appeared before him. The Stygian mist supply was 800 out of a total of 100. A dark energy appeared in Wu Ping's hand and he prepared for a slicing attack. The protagonist created a shield of this energy in front of him and thought he would have to test this trick. Water arrows hit the shield as Ping ran toward his opponent. He thought he would hit first to create an opening. He used 13 points of Stygian mist and launched a powerful black energy attack against his opponent. The man in the jacket quickly dodged. Ping thought he would then use the Night Walker to infiltrate. The man said he was smart enough but not particularly effective. A bright light appeared in front of the protagonist. It emanated from the man, filling all the space around him. Ping became blinded and fell to the pavement, surprised. The man said it was rare for someone to have a power like his. The protagonist couldn't move, thinking he could read minds. Wasn't this unfair? The man asked if Ping was talking to him. Ping realized he couldn't move. He had worked so hard to test this, and it was much stronger than Bo and Sisu. The man became invisible. Ping continued to think, fearing that the only one capable of being so strong was the leader of the sweep team. After a while, the protagonist was leaning in front of the table where the man in the jacket was sitting. He asked how he should address him. The man smiled and said that Ping could call him whatever he wanted, but didn't he really know his name? Ping thought it seemed like the sweet team had figured everything out about him, but why did they decide to meet him this way? He turned to Sisu and asked why she had come here. She replied, calling him by his first name, that he shouldn't overthink it until he could resist the mind-reading ability. Ping was surprised and said nothing. Sisu stated that after him there had been no bearers of unlimited abilities in Pearl City for 200 years. Why didn't he take a look? Ping shouted, "Does that mean he has unlimited abilities? What does that mean? Isn't the highest level of human classification and talent the limit?" He replied that even a person with the strongest talent could only obtain one ability in their lifetime. But the unlimited level is something completely different. It removes the limit on the number of talents and allows for the constant awakening of new abilities. Su also stared at him with interest and said he was curious about one thing. Would his unlimited talent, the path of others, be able to copy his contract jewel? Of course he wouldn't try like this without any warning. Regardless of the outcome, he would be grateful and answer all his questions. The protagonist asked if he could refuse. The man opened a box containing a shimmering bracelet and said yes, but that you should first see what it had to offer. This bracelet was called the Golden Vault, and it was his primary equipment in the early years. It contained the ability for storage. You should understand what that meant. Ping said excitedly that this was very generous. He reached for the bracelet and thought that the vault was exactly what he needed. Su also extended his hand, glowing with magic, and told him to give him his hand. The protagonist extended his hand confidently and remained silent. An energy emanated from the man's hand, enveloping Ping's arm. Su closed his eyes and remained silent. He exhaled and let go of his hand. Ping asked what that had been. The man said that now everything was clear to him. He could not replicate his abilities. Even those arbitrary talents could not be copied, so it seemed that this was due to him being special. Su closed the box and pushed it toward the protagonist. He said it now belonged to him. Ping thanked him for the gift. He took a pair of bracelets and didn't understand anything. A system window opened before him. Successful identification. Replicate. The girl appeared before his eyes, bound with some kind of ropes. He thought, is that how the bracelet was made? People in cloaks were pouring a yellow liquid over the girl and she screamed in pain. The protagonist protagonist thought that all special equipment was made using human lives. What kind of liquid was that? His gaze was fixed on the bracelet, reflecting on what he had seen. Ping turned to Sai-Tu and asked if the process of creating all special equipment was really so difficult. The man replied that this had happened 200 years ago, and although it was now prohibited, there were still unscrupulous people who carried out human sacrifices. He wanted to destroy the equipment, but if used correctly, the spirits of the dead could rest in peace. The young man asked what Pearl City had been like 200 years ago. Was the city full of people killing themselves this way? Sai-Tu placed a mug on the table and said that it was exactly like that. 200 years ago, the city was ruled by the Zhu family. Everyone was their slave with no future, no hope. Men worked day and night but received only a small portion of food. Women were chosen as slaves by the Zhu family and became toys for the men. All children were subjugated and constantly indoctrinated to be loyal to the Zhu family. The elderly who could no longer work were used as food given to be devoured by domesticated alien beasts. At that time, if someone didn't awaken abilities, they were controlled and enslaved or used for the production of equipment. Due to the atrocities committed by the Zhu family, some who had accumulated strength united to finally overthrow them. The protagonist poured more drink from the kettle into the man's mug and said that now he understood everything. Sai-Tu asked if he had any more questions. He called him by name and said that he was so powerful. Why didn't he confront the Moon Prince and free the city again? The man replied that it wasn't that he didn't want to, he simply couldn't. A system window appeared before him. Talent activated. Encrypted communication. He continued, saying that perhaps it seemed like Pearl City's defense was weak. They hadn't even detected the invasion of the celestial faces, but that wasn't true. In reality, the city's defense system was perfect. There was an investigation team that examined the exorcism of alien beasts. Near the city gates, a cleaning group secretly eliminated the aliens. Inside the city, there was still a royal-level artifact, the Pearl of the Sun and Moon. Up close, all creatures were downgraded to level 40 or lower. In other words, even if a real alien beast invaded, it would be reduced to the maximum level allowed. And he, without a doubt, was the strongest fighter at that level. Seifa majestically rose from the table and asked, "And now?" The protagonist also abruptly stood up and asked what he meant. Was there a spy in the city? The man smiled and said it was an excellent deduction. After the disappearance of the city lord, besides him, only the remaining members of the Zhu family knew how to operate the artifact. Had the Zhu family deactivated the Pearl of the Sun and Moon and allowed the celestial fox to enter? Ping, indignant, stated that they were also responsible for the recent encounter with the alien beasts. Right, so why didn't he just kill all those bastards at once? The man replied that after the fall of the Zhu family, they tried to eliminate the remnants. But how could they pull up all the weeds? He feared that they had infiltrated Pearl City for centuries and were almost rooted there. The protagonist observed the man while reflecting. Many suspicions were tied to the forest invasion. What was the Zhu family's goal? Was the city lord dead or still alive? What was the purpose of the alien beasts' rebellion? How powerful was the celestial fox? Until there were answers to these questions, Sai-Tu needed to act with extreme caution. Otherwise, he would fall into the enemy's trap. And if he died in battle, Pearl City would be without hope. Just like the warriors of the past, nuclear weapons were merely a deterrent and shouldn't be used until a critical moment. Even if the Moon Prince continued provoking them and committing murders, anyone could act impulsively, but he wouldn't. The man said that he couldn't copy his abilities, but they needed the protagonist. He approached, extended his hand, and asked if he would like to join the cleaning group. Sai-Tu stared at him seriously, waiting for a decision. The protagonist shook his hand firmly and said he agreed. To forge iron spirit, Jimin asked in the blacksmith's shop why she had started repairing the equipment. Hey everyone, did you enjoy the story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.